so excited. Thank you. I'm so excited that you guys are here for tonight's workshop. This is going to be a little bit of learning and a lot of bit of interaction, so definitely be prepared for that. And I will introduce myself, and then we'll get to know you guys after we go through our agenda. So I'm Jane Patton. I am the campaigns manager for the U.S. fossil economy at the Center for International Environmental Law. I am joining y'all tonight from my home in Southeast Louisiana in New Orleans. This is my home. I'm a fifth generation New Orleanian, or South Louisianian at least. And this place is very important to me, and it also is, unfortunately, the seat of petrochemical production and refining in this country, all the way from here, all the way down the Gulf Coast along Texas. So that's also where a lot of my work is. Workshop is actually the second in the series for the No Dirty Deals campaign. I have the honor of being on the advisory committee for that campaign, and several other of my committee members are here tonight to help me out, including Marisha Malcolm and Kyle Kreider from the People's Justice Council. And I'm really excited that we get to do this. And I love the power that comes out of the South to push for environmental solutions and people power solutions. So, with that, in this particular workshop, we're actually going to spend some time getting grounded in what subsidies are, how they're used by dirty industries, how they're used to fuel dirty industries and redirect our money, the public's money, to these industries, and how we can organize to stop these giveaways. So just to give you an idea of our agenda for tonight, we're going to take a minute to learn about what a public subsidy is. We're going to cover where dirty subsidies are happening, including in the Gulf South, but also nationwide. We're going to talk about how communities have fought back. We're going to break out to think about how we can fight back, either against dirty subsidies or for clean subsidies. And then we'll cover some tools for action before we close out. So, we're hoping that this is going to be an interactive process and that folks will walk away from this with new friends and new connections, definitely to the No Dirty Deals campaign. And we're super excited, excuse me, to have all of you here tonight. So let's talk about what our actual goals here for tonight. So we want to demystify public subsidies and tax credits so that all of us understand what they are. We want to show how dirty industries benefit from them, but we also want to show where we, the people, can benefit from them. And we want to build skills for resisting dirty subsidies and build skills for adopting and getting implemented clean subsidies. In order to do that, we're going to highlight the power that people already have and have used to stop dirty deals and to push for clean deals. So we are really excited about that. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for 1 minute so that we can do a little round of introduction to each other. And the way that I'm going to ask y'all to do this is we're going to sort of go around the country in different regions and ask people to wave their hands or show an emoji if you're not on camera about where you're joining from. So we're going to start with my home. It's where my heart is and where my physical body is right now. So if you're joining from the South or Southeast, please wave your hand or give us an emoji or show some love for down south. All right, John, Kyle, Doug, me. I'm so excited. If you're joining from the Southwest, let's go westerly. Um, Arizona, New Mexico, maybe parts of Texas. All right, Alex, welcome. I'm so excited for you guys to be here. And if you are joining from the West Coast, so all the way against the coast, we're going to go around in sort of a circle. Any West Coast representation? I don't see any. Peg be on deck because now we're headed to the Midwest and the Plains region. So if you're sort of in the middle, say hi, give us an emoji. Hey, Daryl. Hey, Peg. Hey, Miss Peggy. I'm so glad you guys are here. And if you're joining from the Northeast area, the Northeast part of the country, All right, Connor, I love it. And Rachel, welcome, guys. And then if you're from like the Mid-Atlantic region, or if you're from a region that I didn't say, all right, Margaret, I think that was for the Northeast, but I'll give you that one. Um, and then if you're joining from somewhere else, if you're joining from a territory or Alaska or Hawaii, or you're hanging out in Lagos, hey, Marisha, then give us a hand and say that's where you're joining from, just so we get an idea of who's here. So it seems like we've actually got quite a spread. We have folks not just all over the country, but a little bit of representation from outside of the country, which is good. And so I hope you guys will connect with each other. And I am so glad to see some old and new friends here. So this is great. So now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen so that we can jump back into the core thing you guys are here to learn about tonight. So we did the where are you joining from? So I'm going to clip through that. So now we're going to jump into oh, actually, I forgot to do an interactive part. So I'm gonna go back to it, which is we want to ask y'all what is one thing about the way that where you are spends public money. So one thing you change about where and how public funds are invested or spent where you live. So if you can say that in the chat, like think about where public money goes, where you live. What's one thing you change about it, either for the better or away from the bad? What's one thing you change about where public money is being spent where you are? And you can put it in the chat. If you want to raise your hand, you could say it out loud if you want to be bold. Connor, I love a hand raise. Please give us an example.
So I'm in Massachusetts right now with my family or extended family, but normally I live in Durham and I go to Duke. In North Carolina is horribly car dependent, so I'd like to see more investment in public transportation rather than just, widening and building new highways. That's what I would say.
Awesome. I love it. We love public transportation systems. Alex offers no public money for private prisons. Let me shake my abolitionist hands at that. And also no money for oil and gas industries, including petrochemicals. Thank you, Ms. Peggy. Definitely. For the better clean water and filtration systems, oh, that would be amazing in New Orleans. Let's get rid of those lead pipes in New Orleans. I wish we didn't have any lead pipes. Would love for DC to have full control over its budget. Rachel's just choosing to go right for it tonight, which I appreciate. So, definitely control over local budgets is big, and we don't all have that anywhere. So, I think it's good for us to be thinking about how public money gets spent, and thinking about how we would change that. So if you're like, I don't know, man, like what is public money though? And how does it get spent? We're about to jump right into that. So, and I love John throwing into the chat, no eminent domain for private benefit. Absolutely. We don't want anybody taking land for anything other than the public good. And Peg's also throwing in a second vote for no money for private gain. And ag funds for regenerative ag only. So Peg knows that a lot of our public subsidies actually go to agriculture as well. And a lot of that agriculture is fossil fuel related because it all depends on synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. So we have to think about how we are investing our public money everywhere. So with that, I'm going to jump right over into explaining a little bit more about what public subsidies are, and what we mean when we say that. So at its core, a public subsidy is just money paid by a government or the public body to help an industry, business, or individual. That's all it is. It's money from the public to a private entity, whether that's industry, business, or a person. That money is used to promote an activity or an industry, to reduce the price of a commodity or a service, um, like to make land cheaper, and to provide aid to businesses or individuals, right? So financial assistance or aid. Supposedly, these things are meant to be for the public good. We're going to explore that idea critically about what that actually means and how that actually happens. So let's talk about how subsidies actually show up in the real world. They're not just big checks or big line items in a budget. They come in all shapes, and some are designed to be nearly invisible to the public. So let's walk through each of these. So the one you're probably most familiar with is direct cash payments. That one's the easiest to understand. It's literally when the government cuts a check. That might go to a company building a hydrogen hub or a carbon capture project, boo, or to a port that serves the oil and gas industry, double boo. It might also go to do things like fund city buses, right? There are highly visible headline making subsidies that we hear about and have been hearing about for a while. Those come through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, through the CARES Act. Some of the subsidies you might have heard about today, because Congress is voting to roll them back, is funding for public radio. That is a subsidy. And so that is a direct cash payment. But cash isn't the only way that private entities get help or support. They also get it through tax credits and refunds. These are subsidies through the tax code, which essentially just means that companies don't pay what they normally would in taxes. An example of that at the federal level that we organize quite a lot against is 45Q, which is a federal tax credit that pays polluters per ton of carbon that they claim that they are capturing and injecting under the ground. Sometimes they inject it for oil recovery, and now they're getting paid just as much to do it for oil recovery as they were for permanent storage, but that's a whole other complicated problem. But we're not just talking about federal money. State and local governments actually play a really big role as well. And that's where things like ITEP, which stands for the Industrial Tax Exemption Program, and pilots payments in lieu of taxes come in. So the Industrial Tax Exemption Program essentially lets companies skip paying local property taxes for some amount of years, even while polluting nearby communities. In some states, it's only a portion of their their taxable property that they don't have to pay anything on. Louisiana likes to be real generous and just say, oh, it's 100% of your property that you don't have to pay taxes on, as long as you make some kind of capital improvement. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about that story later. Payments in lieu of taxes often sound like deals. You hear about this all the time. Oh, they're going to pay $1 million a year or $100,000 a year to a school district. Oh, they're going to build you a baseball field, right? But if they were actually just paying their taxes, they would be providing a lot more money for local services than building a ball field or paying some nominal amount to the school district locally. But that's what a pilot is, a payment in lieu of taxes. And we hear about those all the time, even though that often means a lot less money for public services like schools, roads, emergency response, public health. Um, and another form that subsidies come in is actually subsidized loans. So these are loans where the government takes on all or some of the financial risk, which means that companies are not held liable necessarily if they can't pay it back, or they give extremely low interest rates. So in theory, these loans can help jumpstart clean innovation, right? That's what they claim. But in practice, fossil adjacent industries and legacy polluters often get access to these loans too. And some of them get early access to these loans more than clean energy would. And there's very little accountability if the projects fail or cause harm. A lot of these loans don't even have stipulation that a project can't be polluting. They just get these loans without a lot of oversight. And some examples of those are like the Department of Energy loans, which have a lot of which under the Inflation Reduction Act have now been taken off the table. But the DOE has been giving loans to energy companies and innovators for a very long time before the IRA stuff. Another example is like SBA loans, that stands for Small Business Administration. Sometimes you'd be surprised how big a business can be and still qualify as a small business. So some of these dirty industries also get loans from through programs like that. And there's another way that's even less visible that that the government gives subsidies, and that is through the sale of goods or services at artificially reduced prices. This is a quieter kind of subsidy. This essentially gives companies discounted access to public resources, whether they like undervalue public land or sell it for a nominal dollar amount or water access, or companies get discounted utility rates. Or they pay the same utility rate as you and me, except they're using 1 million gallons of water a day and I'm using 10, right? That they should be paying more because they're taking more of the resource, but they're not. Another way that this actually shows up is through things like fast track permits. If you don't have to do a full environmental assessment for a permit, that saves you money. That is a subsidy. Also, sometimes they will sell land at a fraction of what it is actually worth. They will build ports with public money, but then those ports are exclusively used by private companies. That is also a form of subsidy. Um, and sometimes they will even sell water, electricity, utilities more cheaply to a company. And either way, that is public property moved over for private profit and sold at essentially unfair rates to the private industry. And then there's a form of subsidy that is even more insidious, and these are hidden transfers. This is where things get really invisible, but sometimes even more expensive than the outright subsidies. For instance, when a company walks away from a toxic site and it folds, it goes bankrupt, and it no longer exists, the public pays to clean up that site. That is a subsidy. When a company gets a permit to inject hazardous waste under the ground, which is something that we issue companies permits to do all the time, and then they abandon that well, and then that well leaks, and the government has to pay to clean it up, that is a subsidy. Written into many state laws is a transfer of liability of carbon injection wells. So a lot of states right now are rushing to be able to issue permits to companies to be able to inject CO2 collected carbon under the ground. And many state laws, like Louisiana, have written into the law that says after a certain amount of time, companies can hand liability and monitoring responsibility for that well over to the government. That is a subsidy. If the government has to pay for something that companies did in the future, that is a subsidy. Additionally, if you live in an area like Cancer Alley, in a place where pollution causes cancer or asthma, and you're the one paying your medical bills, you are paying a subsidy to the corporation because if they are harming you and they're not having to pay your medical bills, that is a subsidy. We're also in a place where, costs that are very insidious are shifted to communities, especially in Black, Indigenous, and working class communities across the country and in the Gulf South. If the local area is dirty, if the film and dust from an aluminum facility is wafting through the air onto your car and you have to pay to clean your car every week, that's a subsidy. And again, this is about privatizing the gains because that corporation gets to keep all their profit and socializing the losses so that if that company folds and they leave a mark on the local environment, we all end up paying it. And whether they are direct or indirect, whether somebody passed a law that said, give that corporation a check, or they said, oh, no, you don't have to pay for that. Those are all forms of subsidy which shift costs off of corporations and on to us. So let's talk now for a minute about who gets subsidies. And I chose this picture on this slide very intentionally because not all subsidies are bad. A lot of public subsidies are good. Y'all, I am a person who believes in what they call the commons. I want all of us to be able to have common shared space, tools for us to have a functioning society. And a subsidy is a tool. It is a way that we use our collective resources to support something that we've all decided matters. The way we fund public schools are subsidized by local and state taxes and even some federal money. Public transit systems, as Connor mentioned earlier, those often run at a loss, but they are kept going through subsidies because people need to get to work, to the doctor, or to visit family. It's one of the reasons why every time we talk about privatizing some of these public services, I'm like, these run at a loss. You should not make profit off of people getting to work. That frustrates me. Also, things like clean energy startups, community solar, especially in a place like Louisiana where we lose power a lot, rural broadband, these are all things that require public investment to get off the ground. Even things like roads and rail lines were all built with the public's money. Parks are funded by a public subsidy. And during COVID, things like stimulus checks and expanded unemployment benefits helped millions of us eat and survive, including me. I got that stimmy check too, and I needed it to pay my mortgage. And those are all subsidies, and those are all deeply good public investments for the public interest. And so I don't want you to leave this thinking all subsidies are bad. I actually want us to leave this thinking more about where we invest our money and how we make sure that our public money is spent on good things that benefit us. Because the same tools that we use to build thriving communities are actually right now being captured by powerful industries. And that includes fossil fuels, petrochemicals, plastics, biomass, also a big problem, to subsidize the pollution and extraction and perpetuate the harm that they have been allowed to perpetuate. And because we are letting them take our public money, we are essentially underwriting our own destruction. And we do not have to do that. So let's look a little bit at who is actually getting a lot of these subsidies. So, a clear beneficiary of public subsidies are dirty industries. Fossil fuels, petrochemical companies, plastics manufacturers, other polluting industries receive dramatic subsidies every year. The IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, reports that as of 2022, it's over $7 trillion a year globally. $7 trillion a year. And that is a number with so many zeros on it. If you were to count 1 second 7 trillion times, it would take you something like 100,000 years to count that long. This is an enormous number, okay? And they're getting it every year. And over 2/3 of that $7 trillion is implicit or hidden subsidies. It's things like air pollution. It's things like climate change. It's things like health impacts that we are paying for that they are not having to pay for. So a lot of these are hidden subsidies. And in fact, the fossil fuel industry in the US is being propped up by federal and state subsidies. Our friends at Oil Change International and the Sierra Club estimate that in the Gulf of Mexico alone, at least 73% of oil production in the Gulf is subsidy dependent. That means we are paying these companies to drill for oil in the Gulf, which is raising the sea levels all around the world, but in particular in the Gulf, and making it harder for me to insure my home. So this is essentially us again underwriting our own destruction. And I want us to remember that if we are aiming to meet the public's energy needs in the most efficient way possible, the cheapest form of energy to build right now is solar, wind, and other forms of renewable energy. They've been cheaper than fossil energy for years, and they're only getting cheaper. And yet, we are throwing money at a more expensive form of energy production. And that is wild. And the reason why that matters is because this is our money. It is our money. And every dollar that your government spends on dirty subsidies is a dollar taken from clean and safe community services. Every dollar. And we should have input over those dollars. And when our dollars are spent on dirty industries, we continue to pay the price. That there are trade-offs to this, and those trade-offs people don't even know they're happening, but they lead directly to forest fires, to floods, to extreme weather, to toxic sludge pollution. This is what we are all facing, and we do not have to do that. You are not just an observer. You live in a place where these decisions are being made every day. There's local subsidies, state subsidies, national subsidies, and we haven't even talked about the World Bank, but that's a whole other conversation. And those decisions that are getting made every day are often being made without you. So this workshop is about changing that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen again and ask for a little bit of participation again. And the question is, you can answer one of two questions, either one. Who do you see benefiting the most from subsidies in your area? We already talked about the Gulf South. It's oil and gas down here. But who do you see benefiting from subsidies in your area? And then what surprises you the most about what you've just learned? Is there anything that just like really stands out for you in what you just learned? And I'm happy to raise hands. And I'm going to ask that, Connor, since we heard your voice already, if you could keep that hand down and I'll invite other folks to speak. And I say that with all the love in the world, all the way to Massachusetts. But would love to hear either in the chat or out loud anything that surprises you or anything you want to share. Yeah, Baba Daryl, go ahead.
Uh, what's up, everybody? I'm in Detroit, Michigan, D-Town, and so I'm gonna say that we have a lot of issues here. Stellantis, which is Chrysler, uh, they've been doing something for a few years that puts some stuff in the air that messes up, especially senior citizens and toddlers in the area closest to them, right here on East Jefferson. And then we have Southwest Detroit, down there where we got a lot of factories and other stuff that have been down there. And for years they have messed up putting stuff in the air, and for some reason they always benefit. The state and other folks keep supporting them and stuff. So it's always a struggle. All right.
And if you're up in the Detroit area, then we also see things like private companies being paid to manage public water systems. That's a subsidy. And if they're trying to do that in a way that is low cost, what that means is least amount of care. And that's what leads to situations where people get sick, right?
Yes, and water was a big issue here in Michigan, and still is in regards to just trying to get the Detroit owns the water system for a lot of the Detroit and suburban areas.
Mhm.
And there's a big struggle just to get them to spend the money doing what they ought to be doing and not neglecting to do what they ought to be doing so people will get the best of the water. And the other thing is that our water is such a messed up thing here that at one point before the COVID, we had almost 20,000 people, 15 or 20,000 people whose water had been shut off by the water company and stuff. So, all right, peace and justice. You know, there's a lot of struggle everywhere we are.
Yes, sir, definitely. So who else has some reflection, some knowledge you can drop about where subsidies go in your area or anything you just want to repeat that you just heard that was surprising? Let's hear some more voices. And silence doesn't bother me none at all. We got 15 more minutes on this section, so
Hmm. Can I jump in?
of course you can.
Okay. So here in Lagos, One of
Mhm.
the major things that I see, well, I'm gonna list two of the things. One is the water. So we live on a landfill, and they pretty much filled the landfill with sand and then built on top of the landfill after covering it with sand. And they use groundwater to you what is it called, to give water out to everyone. So pretty much we're drinking, or not even drinking, but bathing with dirty water filled with trash or whatnot. They try to clean it, but it's
Mhm.
not clean. It still has like a smell in certain areas. We can't drink it. So to me, it's like, why are we cleaning our bodies with it? It doesn't really just correlate for me. So that's one of the things that the government spends their money on. And then another thing is there was a bridge built. But during the time that that bridge was built, there was also a story that the government had some gangsters, if you will, shoot at some of the folks, like random, just the random people who live here. So they shut that bridge down, and you no longer have to pay, or it's like a toll bridge. You no longer have to pay to go over that toll bridge, but they're talking about bringing that back after such a big thing happened for the community. And they actually said that the money, like our tax money, our is kind of not our, their tax money was used to build the toll bridge. So that it's a long story, but these are like a couple of things that is happening here in Lagos, Nigeria, and it's like, wow, this is what our people are going through. This is what we got to put up with. But yeah.
Yeah, it always amazes me when we think about some of the way some of these structures work, exactly how much like folks in many locations, regardless of whether you're in Lagos or Louisiana, we're often being exploited by our government and exploited by industry in really similar ways. And that is a shame, and it's something that I think we should be able to organize and overcome. So, and I just want to pull out of the chat what Miss Peggy said around being distressed by funding being cut on public health and redirected to the oil and gas industry, right? That I think that's a direct reference to the bill that was just signed a couple weeks ago, which actually directly subsidizes and gives a lot of money to the oil and gas industry, exactly as it does things like cuts Medicaid and VA services in a way that should be really, really concerning for all of us. Let's hear from one more person. If something that you've heard in here surprises you, or that you've been thinking about the way public money is spent in your area that you want to share about. Alex, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go, Jane, real quick. I don't know if I'm surprised by a lot these days, but I think the resistance to really doubling down and investing on clean energy when it's good for the environment, safer. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than fossil fuel. And
Mhm.
just the resistance from these structures, and the level of corruption involved in not changing a system which has become outdated and not working for us anymore. It's just unbelievable to me. And I think obviously lobbying and that whole little game, is a big part of the reason why. But these are industries that are resisting and just basically going like this, just not letting go. But just wanted to point that out, and nice to hear from Mauricia all the way in Lagos. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just want to pull out of the chat what we're seeing from Rachel in terms of being surprised exactly how dependent the fossil fuel industry is on these subsidies, right? 73% of the oil exploration in the Gulf is subsidized, is dependent on subsidies. And then Connor talking about how Smithfield in North Carolina receives $6 million in subsidies while they have one of the worst teacher pay rates in the country. And that is actually a really good segue into a success story. This is not all doom and gloom. So I am actually going to tell you a story of something that has worked, and I am excited to talk about it. So I'm going to share my screen again. And we are going to now talk about how communities have fought back, because there is good news. Communities have fought back. I want to tell you a story about Louisiana. So, Together Louisiana, which is a local organizing force that largely organizes through the churches and through nonprofit organizations. It's part of the Industrial Areas Foundation. They've been organizing here for years. In fact, throwback and shout out to something Connor just said. One of their first organizing forces in Louisiana was to keep a bus tax alive. And then shortly thereafter, the project that they took up was actually around the industrial tax exemption program. So it was around this program in Louisiana, which was one of the most generous in the country, that, as I mentioned earlier, allowed for 100% exclusion, exemption of a company's property from the tax rolls if they made even nominal capital improvements. And y'all, a capital improvement is like a new HVAC system. It's like, weather stripping. That is a capital improvement. They didn't even have to create jobs to qualify for this tax exemption program. And the fight against this tax exemption program started with a good idea, an Excel spreadsheet, and district level PDFs of information. And I know this because I helped turn that spreadsheet into those PDFs and get them into people's hands when we first started working on this in 2016. And that analysis became a 10-minute slide deck, I wish I was kidding, that people were trained on how to give to their churches, their community groups, even their families. Y'all, we were really fun at parties for a long time, okay? And when we taught people how to give this presentation, they recorded them doing it, okay? One of those presentations got recorded. It is two people who are not used to being on a microphone, talking on a microphone in front of a PowerPoint deck. This is a screenshot of one of those people giving this 10-minute recording of a 50-slide presentation that went viral on YouTube. I've never seen anything sillier go viral on YouTube, but the name of the presentation was Why Louisiana Stays Poor. And it actually had two parts. That my dear friend Angel Bradford, who gave the second part of this presentation, and it was charts and graphs and numbers about why Louisiana stays poor, showing that we actually pull in a massive amount of money every year for private industry. We have the two of the largest ports in the country by tonnage here in South Louisiana, and our teachers can't get paid. Our hospitals can't stay open. Our public universities are barely keeping the lights on, and some of them aren't keeping the lights on. Why are we struggling? Why are we so poor? And it's because we give away a ton of tax dollars. And the way that this push against the industrial tax exemption program started with connected people. It pushed on to education on the information in a way that was tangible, right? Those PDFs that I mentioned. We didn't just say, oh, company X is getting Y millions of dollars. We said, your parish is losing out on this amount of money for your schools, this amount of money for your health and hospitals, this amount of money for your fire department. And by saying exactly how much money they were missing out on, we really got people to notice and pay attention. We told that story to the media. And then came the really hard part, showing up to every school board meeting, every parish council meeting, every rally, every press conference, every hearing in numbers with fact sheets and with real policy solutions. The very simple policy solution we offered was stop automatically giving this tax exemption. Require every local taxing authority to vote on giving this tax exemption. That's all we were asking for. And in many cases, surprisingly, they won. Between 2016 and 2022, when this report was written by the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, or IEFA, $282 million in new tax revenue was put back on the tax rolls for parishes across the state. In one particular parish, St. John the Baptist, their annual revenue, their annual budget almost doubled from year to year because they were able to get one company in particular, which I'm not going to name because we're not supposed to name companies right now in my organization because it's a real scary time we all live in. But one company in particular was forced to put their property back on the tax rolls, and that parish's budget almost doubled, right? These this money is not just money. It's not just money in the bank. This is higher teacher salaries. This is better schools. This is more schools. This is better and more buses. This is better roads. This is more availability of the guys who climb up into the trees to cut down the limbs that are falling down after the hurricanes, right? This is real, tangible benefits. More public parks with playgrounds that aren't falling down, right? These are real, tangible benefits that we are able to see because people rallied. They showed up, they had the information, they fought. I know all of you also have stories of people fighting. So let's talk about that. What is the campaign against a corporate handout that you've seen win? I want you to think about that in your head. Like, hold that in your head. What is a campaign against a subsidy, against a public corporate handout that you've seen win, even if it's small, you've seen win? And talk to us, put in the chat, what led to the win for that campaign? What were the elements, right? I talked about the Together Louisiana campaign. They didn't just win that by making that information available. Y'all, I make information available all day long. If that was winning, I would be much happier than I am right now. What we have to do, what we had to do, and what they had to do in that campaign was hold relationships, talk to the media, show up, communicate that information in a really particular way that mattered to people. And even then, parts of that fight were won. Some money went back on the tax rolls. Y'all, that wasn't all the money. That wasn't all the money. And even though the governor issued an executive order requiring local tax authorities to vote on each of these tax exemptions, as soon as we got a new governor, he did away with that. And we have not been able to actually like put that back into law. So it is not a universal win. It is $282 million back on the tax rolls, but it is not a universal win. So what do we have to think about? How do we get these wins? Connor, you're talking about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. What were the elements of that campaign that actually allowed that subsidy to not be given?
As far as I know, most of it played out with legal challenges, but I think there was also pretty widespread grassroots opposition, bringing people together to get out, be vocal, protest it. Because you have to shift both, sway public opinion, but you also have to win the legal battles. So it's a fight on multiple fronts, and I think that's pretty key for stopping these developments that go against the public good.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I hang out with a lot of them. And shout out to the lawyers because that the legal challenges are definitely key. What else are we thinking about? What else really matters in how we move the needle on public money? I think one of the first things we had to do with Together Louisiana, remember it started with a spreadsheet. We had to get that spreadsheet from somewhere. So, like knowing where the information is and knowing how to digest that information is also a key part. In Louisiana, we got lucky. It was an online database that we could download that information from, right? In your state, it may be a different system. It may be that you have to submit a public records request. It may be that you have to kind of hunt that down and send a bunch of emails to people at the city or the state. Peggy's talking about the data center subsidiary, right? So there, sometimes these like data for progress or data center organizations are able to go out and find data, find information in a way that you and I wouldn't even know where to look for it, but they can tell you how much a facility uses water, They can tell you how much public subsidies per job a certain company got or certain facility got. And one of the key things we have to remember is I like spreadsheets. I can tell by looking at Connor that he likes spreadsheets, but every person in the public does not like spreadsheets. And the minute you start talking about spreadsheets to people in the public, they're like, what am I going to make for dinner? Do I have food in the cupboard? They're not thinking about spreadsheets. But being able to communicate to people the information that you're able to find in a way that is interactive, in a way that is visual, right? That's important. There's another real basic aspect to organizing, to bringing people together. If you want people to show up for something, what do you need to do for them? Kyle, Julianne, Doug, you guys have ideas? What do you need to do for people if you want them to show up to something?
Show what's in it for them.
Uh-huh. You need to show what's in it for them. And more immediately than that, Kyle, it's getting around about 5 o'clock. What do you need to do for people if you want them to show up to a 5 o'clock meeting? I bet Daryl knows. What do you have to do for people, Daryl?
I give them some information so that they be nosy as hell to find out what's going on and offer them some refreshments to come on up and see what's up.
Yep, Daryl and Rachel got it at the same time. You have to feed them. Y'all, we are, it turns out, watery meat sacks that run on food, and you have to feed us. And childcare, that's another key part of it. If you want people to show up for things, I can't tell you how many organizing things I have been to where I was chasing a 3-year-old around the room. And that is, I was able to do that. And other people aren't necessarily. And not everybody wants to chase a 3-year-old around the room while they're trying to get information. So if you have somebody whose job it is to do that, that can be game changing in getting people to show up. And I don't know how it's possible that babysitters are still charging the exact same amount of money they were when I was a babysitter 20 years ago. So that is something that we definitely need to be thinking about building into our budgets and getting volunteers to do is childcare and feeding. That is also something that we have to do to get people to show up. So it's real human stuff, right? You got to have relationships. You got to have people's contact information. That's the other thing in order to get people to show up. You can sort of put a poster out there, or you can have somebody's phone number. You can drop them a text message, right? And that is sometimes the most crucial thing that gets folks to show up is y'all's relationships, being able to connect with people, having them trust you so that they show up, right? That's a key part of it too. Are there any other parts of like campaigns, um, whether it's about public money or it's about policy or some other public change, any other part of campaigns that y'all think is really essential that we haven't really talked about here yet? We got information, we got meeting people where they are, feeding them. What else? What am I
Can,
missing?
can I say
Daryl.
something real quick? I
Yeah.
know we all live in a new world like we in the Jetsons cartoon. But it
Mm,
would be good when we can go door to door and leave information and talk to people and get them interacting with us. And then they'll show up to what you're getting them to show up to, and they'll get to
mm,
know a lot of things. And I'm not trying to say that computerization and other kind of stuff's not good, but in some ways folks are everybody's not seeing that or knowing they should be paying attention to that. But if you go door to door and hit people up in the community where you handing them something, and if they got a question or tell them something, then you'll get a lot of reactions of a whole lot of different people, not just the same people in the community. I hope that makes some sense.
yeah. And I think those relationships and connections are really important. And also invest in some good shoes if you're going to be knocking on doors, right? You got to be comfortable while you're out there. You got to stay hydrated. Don't forget, you're a watery meat sack. It needs water. So I think all of these things are really important for us to keep in mind, right? And I think one of the other things, and I hope that I've been modeling that here for you tonight as well, is we got to have joy, y'all. And I know that sometimes you are scraping that out of the very bottom of your soul. And I know that sometimes you are getting that from a pill bottle every morning. And however you are getting the joy and maintaining it today, bring that into this work because people will remember the way you made them feel a lot more than they will remember the actual things that you said. And being able to move and organize with joy and bring people joy even in the face of hard things is so important. And I think that is also a big part of what we're doing here. It's hard to be joyful when you're talking about decades of giving away public money to a private organization. It's hard to be joyful when you look at Louisiana and know that we only had 9 charity hospitals 20 years ago, and now we only have 4, right? That is hard when you are looking at that. And we have got to figure out how we stay joyful. And that, sometimes feeding people is one of the ways we do that. Breaking bread is one of the human traditions of how we bring people together and how we do things like this. Also, people are just more attentive if they're fed. That's the other thing. You're going to make them pay attention to a PowerPoint, at least give them a cookie. You know what I'm saying? So now we're going to do we're actually going to break out into rooms, which I'm excited about. I'm so excited about breakout rooms. And before we do that, though, I'm going to walk you through exactly what we're going to do here. So we're going to practice using some of what we learned. We're going to give you one of 2 prompts. One is about fighting against a bad subsidy. One is about fighting for a good subsidy. So I'm going to walk you through 2 different prompts, and we want you to choose one. Marisha is right now setting up the breakout rooms, and you are going to go into one of 2 rooms. Either you can choose it and join it yourself, or you can put it in the chat and one of us will put you in a room. So I know that sometimes the breakout rooms in Zoom are very tricky and not everybody's up to speed or with the current version of Zoom. So if you need help with that, we'll definitely help you out. But we have 2 prompts you can choose from. So the first one, fighting against a bad subsidy. In this instance, a new dirty industry wants a tax break to build in your area, and they'll be able to build in your area because of that tax break. Your local council can opt to not give them the subsidy, though. They have the power to do that. We want you in the breakout room to talk about what support or information you need to go into a meeting with a council person, who you will organize with in preparation for that meeting, and what you will say to that local council person when you talk to them. What do you think will move them? How should you think about stopping a subsidy for a dirty industry, right? So that's our first prompt. Our second prompt is fighting for a good subsidy, something you want, right? So in this scenario, this example, you want your state to invest in clean and safe development. Right now, they have a habit of dirty development. You want clean and safe development. Think about what kind of subsidies you want to see. What kind of projects do you want to talk to them about that deserve funding? And how would you talk to political, but also economic leaders? Remember that a lot of development in states happens because of economic leaders, not just your elected officials. Think about how you would talk to your state leaders about this. And again, who do you need to build support with? Who do you need to organize with in order to get what you want out of this? So, in one, you're going to think about what information you need and who you'll organize with, and what you will say to a local council person to get them to vote against a dirty subsidy. And then in the other prompt, we will ask, thanks, Alex, for being with us. Thank you. In the other prompt, you will talk about wanting your state to invest in clean and just alternatives, in clean and safe development. And you'll think about what kind of projects you want to see, what kind of leaders you'll talk to, and then who you'll organize with to get that achieved. So we're going to ask, I think Marisha is going to open the breakout rooms. Kyle, I think, is going to facilitate the other room. We automatically assigned people, but you can move if you want to move. So, um, and Kyle, you want to do the against? Oh, he's gone. Okay. I'm gonna go to 4 then.
Let me see which one he's in. He's in fight against. You can go to fight for. Okay. Please be in the right one. Yes. Beautiful.
And we operate kind of at the we're actually an interfaith organization. Um, we're actually an interfaith organization. In fact, Marisha is my colleague. I'm program policy director, and she is our program manager. In fact, she is about to be promoted to program director.
Nice.
So I'll be policy director. She'll be program director. But yeah, we operated this nexus of energy, climate, and justice. And
Hmm.
energy burden is one of our main driving factors here. As you know, it's prevalent throughout the Southeast. And we've, I mean, I know Duke has its problems, but they got to work hard to beat Southern Company. And Alabama Power is the most regressive head of the Southern Company Hydra. So we are dealing with some serious energy burden issues, and in fact, we typically start with an energy burden map. And when we're targeting a frontline community, we start with the energy burden map and see who's the worst of the worst, because it's generally bad down here.
Yeah.
Well, Marisha, we were just doing a round of introductions since we've got plenty of time. Connor's already been answering the questions
I
quite
was jumping right
efficiently.
into it. I was excited. Good activity.
I
So
love,
we actually took a step back to introduce ourselves.
excuse me. I knew you would be a talker, Connor, so I was very excited to come and join this side. Hi y'all, my name is Marisha Malcolm. As Kyle has introduced me, I am the programs programs director, new and upcoming. As of now, I
Go on
am
and say program director.
as of now, I am just the programs manager, and I also manage our social media. This is this No Dirty Deal campaign is one of the campaigns that I currently am leading. And yeah, we are the watchdogs of dirty subsidies in the Gulf South. So these workshops are to show real solutions of how we can fight against these dirty subsidies that not only exist in the Gulf South but everywhere. So these community solutions are hopefully for folks to take back to their communities and be able to implement there. As Jane has already stated, this is our second installment, and we have about three more left that'll run throughout the summer. And yeah, I hope y'all are interested and continue to stick around with us. And if you are interested and even want to join our advisory board, just drop your emails in the chat and I will be glad to invite y'all to the meeting.
Yeah, Connor, please stay in touch. In fact, do you know our we got lots of good friends in North Carolina, but one of our very best is Susanna Tuttle. Um,
I do not know, but sounds like someone very cool.
she's with North Carolina IPL Interfaith Power and Light and North Carolina Council of Churches still, I believe. Sorry, my mouse just fell off because my cat shifted. Um,
Yeah, the Council of
but
Churches, I think they're helping with some fiscal sponsorship because I'm a paid intern for the summer and I think they're helping support that. So I
great,
definitely want to learn more about the work they do.
great. We need you.
Glad to join, glad to participate.
Well, yeah. Then back to the questions that you were so efficiently answering. Uh, because we're dealing with a very practical issue with this ourselves that I won't get us off track on. But what would you say to your local council member?
think I would say I was trying to puzzle this out during the meeting, like when we were learning about, the reasoning behind different things. I would, my case would probably be something along the lines of like, I would say, while economic development isn't inherently a bad thing, and we do want, prosperity and business in our area, if it doesn't go back and benefit the people, that's not something we want to go with. And especially if it's going to actively hurt the people, that's even worse than just a business that doesn't actually contribute anything. That's a negative force in our community. And this is the worst possible option to or letting them be in here with a tax break is the worst possible outcome for the community and for, our economic development and prosperity. That something along those lines.
That's a great argument in my book. Yes, I love the way Jane she used one of my favorite phrases when dealing with this because so many people champions of capitalism and free market and all this, but what we really have is it's not capitalism because we have privatized profits, as Jane said, but socialized costs.
Yeah, that was a
The
good way to
whole
put it. I
point of
hadn't
this.
heard that. I hadn't heard it, or I hadn't heard it phrased that way before, but that gets
Yeah,
to the heart of it.
I mean, there is no, so we and y'all all know how important framing is, especially when we're talking to the other side.
Yeah.
Let's use their definition of creeping socialism and turn it right back on. The biggest creeping socialism that we're seeing is these expletive deleted, subsidies that are, in many cases killing people and certainly costing lives and dollars.
Mm. exploiting public resources just in a negative and harmful way, but they don't want to call it that, or they don't want to claim that, they're being propped up by government funds if they're all about,
Exactly.
entrepreneurship and free markets. Yeah.
Speaking of welfare state, yes,
Yeah.
the real welfare state.
Yes, literally. And I think, well, also one of the questions was who will you need to organize with, right? Because we also have to, work with public opinion. Even if we have a good conversation with the council member, we need broad-based support.
Exactly.
It would be helpful. I think, I mean, reaching out to your personal connections in the area, like any constituents that council members or representatives or commissioners are actually, beholden to support and to act in the best interests of, and then business leaders, church, like, I guess, yeah, y'all would probably be pros with this, but church leaders, especially in the Southeast, they're a very powerful force.
Into doing things like ripping up concrete and installing water-friendly infrastructure. And they don't normally work on policy things, but they know the like water issues more than any other group in the city. So like that's also somebody that I would want to tap in. And then Peggy says that she started a 501(c)(3 that writes small grants for education on water and pollution between the Great Lakes, the Ohio River Valley, and beyond, right? Because these folks live downstream. So, yeah, I mean, like also being able to tap people who know how to write on this, who know how to tell stories on this, whether it's to raise money or educate people, I think that's really important also. Daryl, you mentioned this We the People group that sounds a little bit like the Together Louisiana. Like this is a group that was already organized and sort of had structure and knew each other, even though their issue maybe wasn't water, but like that they had this infrastructure of connection and trust and they had whatever the modern equivalent of a phone tree is, right? They could call people and get them to show up. Yeah.
No, We the People was started here by folks who worked with a lot of different issues and a lot of different stuff. But these
Yeah.
came together because of the how painful and how messed up communities was having to deal with some of the water product problems here, and so that's why they came together. And one of the leaders is called Mama Monica. And because of the things that they were able to do here, I know it sounds really crazy, but all you sisters won't be surprised. It's a good thing when you have women coming together and talking to the community and stuff, because other women and brothers began to pay attention and stuff,
Mhm.
because they don't mind. They don't mind doing what they got to do to build the relationships and to get people to understand what the hell they need to be paying attention to and what they need to be doing to help each other and how they can communicate to other folks and
Mhm.
get them the attention too. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you knew the women here that started and still around for We the People, you'd understand what I was talking about because they still at it.
I think I understand a little bit of that. So, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that points out is that like you always just have to understand who is good at turning people out in any given community. And like sometimes there will be like pre-existing groups that are already really good at turning people out because they run like the block parties or
Mhm.
because they're church leaders or because, like there's so many different ways that folks already have infrastructure to support each other and to come together around a variety of issues. And there's always someone who's like known in the community for like they know how to turn people out regardless of what the issue is. And yeah, find like identifying them and then working with them can be one of the most effective ways to reach a broader group of people.
Exactly. I think that's really good. And that also means that like they know who to call, how to call them, and what to say to get them to turn out, right? So that's also really crucial. Um, so as we're thinking about like talking to political leaders, right? So imagine that we have a particular thing that we want to focus on around clean water, that we've crunched the numbers, we know how much it's going to cost. We have a big organizing force, we've got folks to turn out. Like, how are we going to talk to our leaders? Like, are we going to are we going to do like big mass rallies? Are we going to do like one-to-one meetings? Are we going to do like testimony at public hearings? Like, how are we thinking about speaking that truth to power? And we've gotten our 5-minute warning. Thank you. In the main session, which is very exciting. Thank you. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And now we're going to do a little bit of a report back. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong way. We're going to do a little bit of a report back. So we want to hear back from each of the groups. And I think I very poorly prepped my group to do a bit of report back. But so you can also do it in the chat. But what did your group come up with? What was the scenario you envisioned? And what's one idea or insight that really stood out for you? I'm going to stop my share again so people can see each other. But what's an insight that really stood out for you from your conversation? Or what did your group sort of come up with and think about? We can start with the against group because I wasn't in that one. So you guys can talk. Did you
Well,
have any?
Connor rocks
Yeah.
the against group. So Connor, I'd love for you to report if you will.
Yeah, I'm on it. So some of the scenarios we talked about, I mean, in the hypothetical and also in both of our states, were data centers and natural gas plants as the negative industries coming into effect with the potential for them receiving subsidies. So some of the things we said we'd need to find out or prepare before going to, talk to council member was like research and data on quantifiable impacts like health harms from pollution or fracking, for example. So health harms, rises in cost for energy burden, if the bills go up from a new massive thing draining the grid.
Mm.
And we said basically the way I framed the case, like hypothetically talking to the council member, was that, you know, economic development and prosperity isn't inherently a bad thing, but in the case where you're giving subsidies and actively harming your constituents, then there's not a single win in that except for the business. You're making
Mhm.
people less healthy, making things more expensive, and you're missing out on the chance to gain revenue to help develop your community and invest in your citizens. So that was sort of the case I made. And then we were talking a bit about, the organizing side, trying to sway public opinion, using your personal connections, going to institutions and organizations like churches, businesses, community groups, because you can have all the research, you can have a good presentation to the council member. But one of the key things is having the, support of public opinion, which is easier said than done, but definitely a necessary component.
Exactly. Anything anybody would add to that, Kimberly or Kyle? You got a
All
heart.
good.
Excellent. Okay, well, is somebody from our group willing to report back? Maybe Rachel or Daryl, I don't know, Peggy, if you're still in a loud space, but what was sort of a key takeaway that was resonating with you? What did we talk about? Daryl was chatty in the breakout group, but he doesn't like a report back.
I don't know if I can report back. I think our conversation was pretty good, but I think that we were talking about taking the struggle to make things good, dealing with making things good. And one of the things that we talked about had to do with similar to the the report that we just heard, was beginning to interact with people in the community and organizations and stuff, and bringing them together to understand what's going on and what needs to happen, so that energy can help you build the kind of energy that you need to both make whoever's running the water system, make them act like and do what they need to be doing, and to build the kind of support from elected officials and state and county and city money that could come there based on the power and and the connection of the people in the community and stuff and what they want. I know that's probably not the 100% of how we talked about, but I'll throw that out there. Y'all can go from there.
No, I appreciate that. I think one of the things that we sort of wrapped the conversation by talking about was also like, what are the things we want to focus on when we talk to a decision maker about positive subsidies, right? We were talking specifically about like clean water and making sure that folks have access to clean water, but sort of overall, we were talking about like a decrease in costs, both from water lost, but also decrease in health costs, right? The cleaner your water, the lower your health costs, and also the higher your productivity. So, really thinking about talking to decision makers about cost savings and cost reduction, and also about access to jobs. I think that's something that local decision makers really care about because people care about access to jobs, right? People need to work. And if one industry is saying they're offering 1,000 jobs, which is probably not true, then we need to be able to also tell a story of how many jobs other forms of industry are offering. So, and yeah, policymakers love a cost benefit analysis, and you're right, it does often underestimate the social and economic benefits. And in my experience, these companies lie about how many jobs they're going to create. And that is something that is actually really hard to counter. And I think one of the most cutting edge forms of research is actually looking at jobs promised versus jobs actually delivered. Because we hear companies say, oh, this facility is going to create 100 jobs. And then the next day they apply for a tax exemption that says they're going to create two. jobs. Like that is an actual example that we saw. On Thursday they claimed 100 jobs. On Friday they filed an application that said two. Like this is something we see all the time. And so I think that is really frustrating. And yeah, like the construction jobs, right? Builder's gonna build, right? Whether they're building a pipeline or they're building something else, like let's figure out how we get folks to build or retrofit or fix things that have a real community benefit. And I think that's something that we can really make some arguments around as well. So I liked that we had some thoughts here around how we push back against the bad, but also how we bring in the good. I hope that one of the sort of key lessons that you leave with is that not all subsidies are bad, but also there's quite a lot of bad subsidies out there. So I just want to show you a couple more things, which is resources that we actually like the tools for action that you have at your disposal. I want to make sure you actually have some concrete tools that you can use in your work. So, the first thing is to be able to get educated, right? Is to track subsidies. Specifically, you can look at Good Jobs First, which I just put in the chat. This is actually a national and in some cases international subsidies tracker. It has a silly name, but if you go online and you search your location or you search a particular industry, you can get not just a summary, a subsidy by subsidy record of all the subsidies that a company has gotten or that have gone to a particular area. It's one of my very favorite things on the internet because I am a nerd. And so that's one of my favorites. Also, you should look for a local subsidies database. Like Louisiana has this database called Fastlane that's built by our Louisiana Economic Development. Note that I did not say the governor's office. I did not say the state legislature. I said the public-private partnership of Louisiana Economic Development, which is a black box. I don't even know who works there, but they do have some data online, and I would definitely recommend that you look up your local statewide economic development. Like start to shine some lights around in that black box and see what you can find, including data, but also, maybe things that are a little more scurrilous. So that's one. Another one is if you want to know about dirty projects, like if you're wondering if there is a dirty oil and gas project or fossil fuel industry or any of the dirty industries coming to your area, one of my favorite databases online is the Oil and Gas Watch database. This is run by the Environmental Integrity Project. It is once again one of the very best databases I've ever found on the internet. Not only does it give you information on individual facilities and where they're being built and what kind of subsidies they're getting, it also tells you if they have any permits under review, when comments on those permits are due. And those can be very interesting no matter where you are in the country. And they have different filters so you can look at different kinds of projects. This obviously doesn't catch all dirty projects, dirty industry, but it catches almost all the oil, gas, petrochemical, pipeline, emitters, agrochemicals. It's a pretty cool database. I would also recommend that you plug in with local and national coalitions. We talked about this, right? That nobody ever wins this fight alone. And I know that there are prizes and think pieces and profiles in the Atlantic out there that make you think that individual people can make change. And actually, we can't. We have to do this together, right? And it is important that you find your people and you find your coalition. And I can't, unfortunately, tell you who all those coalitions are by nature of the fact that they're super local. Also, sometimes you have to start a coalition. And if you want a conversation about starting a coalition, I will drop my email in the chat because I have done that many times. And so let's have a conversation about that. But chances are there's already one that exists where you are, and get on their mailing list and go to their meetings. And maybe one day make red beans and rice or something for the meeting. And then there's also quite a lot of toolkits that are available online. I'm just going to give you one example. which is CIEL's own pushback against petrochemicals. This is a toolkit that we put together. If you are fighting a petrochemical facility, linked in that toolkit are a number of other toolkits because we did not invent this wheel ourselves. We just augmented it slightly. And there's lots of toolkits for fighting pipelines and fighting gas refineries and all sorts of things. And if you are looking online for organizing toolkits, you can look for that. If you want to read the Midwest Academy's book, I have it on my bookshelf, as should everyone, which is the Midwest Academy's Organizing for Social Change, which is a great book. And there's only so much you can learn from a book. There's only so much you can learn from a toolkit. Sometimes you just got to be out there in the struggle, and oftentimes that involves sitting in somebody's living room, eating a bowl of food you don't actually maybe like that much, but you have to have a conversation with folks and you have to be in coalition. So, as we close out, I am going to ask every person to share in the chat one thing you are going to do leaving this space. What is one next step that you will take for your community before the end of the summer? So it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but before the end of summer, which I believe is technically September 20th, if I understand how the equinoxes and things work. That's probably not even the right thing. I don't know. Um, but give us one thing in the chat that you are going to do, a step you'll take for your community around public subsidies before the end of the summer. What are you going to do? Kyle's fighting a hyperscale data center in Bessemer, Alabama. Ugh. Kyle's going to keep fighting that data center. What else are folks going to do? Don't all talk at once now. Thanks, Daryl. You can come to meetings I facilitate anytime. Peggy's been to them. Peg, who was here earlier, has been to them. And this is not even the first meeting I facilitated today, Daryl. Okay, so Peggy is gonna revise I don't know what all of those, oh, League of Women Voters. I know that one. I don't know what WTH stands for though. But you are gonna revise some natural resources manual, which is great. Marisha is gonna host more workshops to inform people about hidden subsidies nearby. I love that. I will make sure you have all the tools. Connor is going to spread awareness and educate community members about Duke Energy. Hell yeah, if that's where you're normally based. That's North Carolina, right? Yeah. All right. Rachel, what are you going to do? You're the only Kimberly, Rachel, you guys haven't weighed in yet. I haven't heard Kimberly at all. I'm not even sure if she's a real person. I'm sure she's a real person. That was a joke. Maybe they've stepped away, which is also fair. Well, we started off strong, but we whittled down a little bit at the end. Rachel's going to keep fighting for local control of the budget. Oh man, that's so important. So, well, thank you guys so much for attending and staying till the end. And as a little present for staying till the end, you get my email address. Congratulations. Connor, you didn't need to react like that. Daryl, you and I are already in text message group chat, so you have my contact information. But thank you guys so much for being here and spending your Thursday evening with us, especially since I know it's dinner time for some of y'all. So please go get some dinner and hug your babies and find your joy because it's hard out there, y'all. So thanks for being here tonight. And if you're in South Louisiana, stay dry because it's supposed to rain again later. So thank you guys so much. And thank you,
Thank
Marisha,
you
for
very
bringing it all
much.
together.
All right, thank you. Everybody take best care. Peace.
This
Bye,
was great.
y'all.
Have a
Cheers,
great
Thank
night.
everybody.
you.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, y'all.